One of the things that lawyers are trained to do is to answer questions. We answer questions and solve problems for a living, whether it's for clients, for family members, or that random acquaintance who suddenly remembers us when they need free legal advice. Now, some questions are more common, like, "Attorney, how do I compel someone to pay me back? Who among you here have lent money to your friends? Has your friend paid you back?" Yes. Who here is still waiting for payment? Let's talk later. Or maybe you're on the other side of the coin where you may ask, "Attorney, can I go to jail for not paying my credit card bill?" You won't, but your parents might if you're using their credit cards. And then there are the more creative questions like, "How do I sue my ex for emotional damage?" Who here wants to sue her ex? Over there? Well, my advice to that is, sweetie, it's much cheaper to just move on than hire a lawyer. Do you know how much they're paying me for this? I'm just kidding. All right. Now, kidding aside, I currently work at the Supreme Court Office of the Spokesperson, as was mentioned earlier, where the questions have only multiplied, especially from reporters who have a talent for asking the real hard-hitting questions, like, what's the extent of the Supreme Court's power? Or the one everyone wants to know lately, the validity of an arrest. And as you can imagine, these questions are a lot more complicated. Beyond the legal and political questions, there are also the more personal ones, the kind only I can answer. And one question I've been asked repeatedly is this: why did you become a lawyer? And there's this phrase that I always read in pleadings and decisions, and it goes like this: in the ordinary course of things, which means in the usual or normal way that things happen, a situation where events naturally unfold. And then there's this other legalese phrase, in due course, which means at the appropriate time. And that's my answer to the question. It was inevitable, bound to happen at the right time. However, when I think about it deeply, that journey from point A to point B, from being a Miriam College high school student like you to being the lawyer that I am now, was not a linear path. Because nothing in life is ever linear, right? There are twists and turns along the way, turning points. And other people define turning points as, life-altering moments that change the course of your life. Or another more practical or realistic definition is that these are the moments, the small moments of action or reflection that are no less significant in shaping your future. And so today, allow me to tell you about the 3 turning points that shaped my journey into being a proud female lawyer in a male-dominated field. The first turning point was when I discovered the power of stories. When I was a child, I loved reading books. I practically devoured them. And the first book that I ever read was Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. We have this in the library, and it's a series. And basically, this book is about a young orphan girl named Anne Shirley who was intelligent. She had a fiery imagination and a sharp tongue. And one of the key plots in the story was how she would constantly compete academically with her classmate Gilbert Blythe. That was just one of the many books about women that I read. Again and again, I found myself in worlds where women were protagonists, bold, brilliant, and unafraid to take up space. These stories didn't just entertain me, they rewired my brain into thinking that women are not just on the sidelines. They are protagonists of their own stories. And even when people said that they couldn't, they did it anyway. That became the template for how I lived my life. In my family, there are 9 lawyers. 9. I'm sure you can already imagine what our conversations are like. But how many of those lawyers are women? Can anyone hazard a guess? 1, 2. Only 2 are women. Incidentally, the other female lawyer is my sister, who's also a graduate of Miriam College High School. Growing up, the legal world felt like a boys' club, but that didn't stop me. Why would it? I grew up immersed in stories where women are capable and strong, and I wasn't going to start listening now. In the Philippines, women have made remarkable strides in the legal profession. As of 2025, 56% of judges nationwide are women. And just last April, history was made with the appointment of the Supreme Court's first ever female spokesperson. More and more women are not just participating in the legal profession. They are shaping narratives and creating discourse. But while a lot of women are stepping into positions of power, a lot more are still struggling. In 2023 alone, over 8,000 cases of violence against women and children were reported. VAUSI cases, child abuse, human trafficking, rape. This number isn't just statistic. It's an urgent reminder of what needs to be done. And it reminds me actually of a client of mine that I once represented, a woman who suffered years of physical and verbal abuse from her partner. And every day for her was a legal battle, not just against the trauma of the past, but also against the emotional toll of actually fighting for her rights in court. Because the reality is, going to court is a long and arduous battle. It's very stressful. But if you stick to it, you might just become triumphant. In a recent decision, the Supreme Court held that psychological violence against women need not be proven by a medical psychological report, and that we can rely on the testimonies of victims, removing an additional barrier and making it easier for women like my client to seek protection under the law. And when I think of women who stand their ground, I am always reminded by this quote from also one of my favorite books, The Color Purple by Alice Walker. And Sally said, "I'm poor, black, I may be ugly and can't cook, but I am here." That's the kind of presence that women have always had. We are here and we are not going anywhere. The law, at its best, does what the greatest stories do. They give women a voice and a chance to reclaim their power. And that brings me to my second turning point. As a lawyer, I'm used to speaking my mind, right? I'm used to sharing my ideas. But we all started somewhere. And for me, that's when I learned how to assert myself and later assert for others. Let me tell you about my younger brother now. Now, I hope he doesn't hold this against me, but my younger brother was extremely stubborn. as a kid. One day I said, enough is enough. I'm going to try and help out my parents a little bit. And so at the wise old age of 12, I drafted my very first contract. It says, the 10 rules my brother has to follow. And then there were sanctions at the side, like he can't play basketball, he can't have another cup of rice, things like that. And I made him sign it with his name, and I proudly taped it on our refrigerator. Mind you, he was 8 years old at that time, which makes the contract completely invalid. But he wasn't wise enough to consult a lawyer back then. Now, that one small act brought weeks of peace into our home. And it taught me that sometimes the best way to solve a problem or approach a solution is to confidently speak up and share your ideas. Good ideas can come from anywhere, whether you're a 12-year-old kid, a lawyer, or a high school student. You have to muster the courage to speak up. And who knows, it might just make things better or make a life better. By the way, that brother of mine is now in the legal banking profession and himself aspiring to be a lawyer. Now, I had the same approach when I reached high school. When I was in high school, I was the type of student who was very serious about exams. And so I had this habit of approaching my teachers and asking them, Miss, why is letter A better than letter B? Or, Miss, how can I improve my essay? My English teachers and my Filipino teachers know this most especially, like Miss Gray, Miss Macapagal. They know this perfectly well. And my teachers were gracious enough and very patient in answering my questions and indulging my curiosity and need for answers. But then, college happened. I went to UP. Different school, different culture. And one day, the test results came out, right? And, it was fine, my results were okay, but old habits die hard. And so I was a freshman, I was, very sort of curious. I was curious. And so I raised my hand and asked, Ma'am, why is letter A better than letter B? And to my surprise, the professor wasn't thrilled. In front of the whole class, she told me, you're just bargaining for points. Which was completely untrue. And so, I didn't want to just let the situation be. So, as politely as I could, I said, Ma'am, I'm sorry. I just really wanted to understand the lesson. Thankfully, she mellowed down and she explained the answer. But that moment really stuck to me because I realized then that asking questions wasn't just a habit for me. It's who I am. And in life, sometimes you have to ask questions. You can't just say yes all the time. You can't just keep quiet even when there's doubt in your mind. You have to have the courage to raise your hand and ask that difficult question. You may rock the boat, raise a few eyebrows here and there, but you can disagree without being disagreeable. As it turns out, that wouldn't be the last time that I would find myself in a defensive position. Fast forward 2 years later, I went to law school, I passed the bar, and I started looking for a job. I wanted to be a litigation lawyer or the one who appears in court, like Harvey Specter from Suits or Rachel Zane. And so I applied to different places, I went to interviews, I faced a panel of seasoned lawyers who are trained in the art of cross-examination. And there was this one interview where a lawyer asked me something that completely blindsided me. She asked me, Attorney Marilag, we are aware that you used to join modeling contests and beauty pageants. Don't you think that lawyers or even judges may have a misconception about you because of that? For a moment, I was stunned. Even until now, when I think about it, I feel surprised. That wasn't in my resume. And most of all, there was an underlying message in the question. That somehow, your interest in beauty or fashion clashed with being a lawyer. That it could be seen as a disadvantage. It was so easy to cower in that moment and deny what I did before. But no, I don't want to be ashamed. And so I took that opportunity to change a misconception. I met her gaze and confidently I told her, Ma'am, actually beauty pageants have been used by women to advocate for their causes. And taking part in them does not make a lawyer any less smart or competent. In fact, it just proves that women can excel in multiple spaces. At the end of the day, when I appear in front of a judge, I want to be judged based on my competence and my legal knowledge. And then there were a few nods here and there, a few smiles. And in that moment, I knew I had reframed the conversation based on my own terms. In the legal profession, or anywhere you go, you will find yourself still constantly proving to the world why you deserve a seat at the table. Sometimes for reasons that are not related to your competence. But if you rise to the challenge, you will not just create a turning point in your own life. You can also help break stereotypes and change norms for the people who come after you. Being a litigation lawyer gave me the opportunity to fight for clients when it mattered the most. From Laguna to Bohol to Benguet Province, I've had to argue through high-stakes legal battles, defending clients who are out on bail, facing the terrifying prospect of prison, or helping children, siblings, to get their rightful share in their father's estate. These cases are not just about the law. They're about fighting for people at their most vulnerable. I can't emphasize this enough. Using your voice matters. And sometimes, using your voice for other people matter the most. A single decision, a single shift in perspective, a moment of courage can change the course of a case, a career, or even a life. The third and final turning point that I want to talk about is when I answered the call to public service. After advocating for others in court, I found myself in a different kind of legal battlefield. That of ensuring clarity, transparency, and trust in the justice system itself. Joining the Supreme Court was a shift unlike any other. My job wasn't just about crafting legal arguments anymore. It's about translating the law for the public, breaking down complex legal rulings to make sure that justice is understood by the people. It was a new challenge, a new responsibility, and a new way to use my voice. not just for individual clients, but for the country. At the Supreme Court, turning points happen every single day. A single decision can change the course of history, can redefine rights, and shape policies. And this is where the youth come in. You have the power to participate in this transformative process. Turning points in our country don't just happen inside the courtroom because of justices in robes. Turning points happen when people pay attention, when they ask questions, and when they hold institutions accountable. Turning points happen because of citizens who refuse to look away. Remember, girls, every landmark ruling in the Supreme Court started with a single person raising a concern. So don't think of the law as something distant or untouchable. The law shapes your life. And you have the power to shape it right back. In my case, from discovering the power of stories, to advocating in court, and to stepping into public service, I've learned that the law is not just something to use. It's not just something to follow. It's something to change, and it's something to shape. And for you, young women of Miriam College High School, believe me, your own turning points will come. And so, I would like to leave you with just one question. When that moment arrives, will you step up and shape it? I hope the answer is yes. Thank you.